What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Dynasty Stock Market here on the Fantasy Stock Exchange. We have a buy low episode for you today on those future Dynasty stars. But before we get into that, I'm going to introduce once again my good buddy, Dylan Mazzola. Dylan, how the hell are you?
I'm happy to be here. Happy to talk football. Once again, this is my third time back, so I'm doing something right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, definitely love having you on, and I know the guys like seeing you on here too. So definitely have to keep it up as the season goes on. Before we get into this video, this is actually going to be the last Dynasty video that we come out with for a little while, or should I say the Dynasty specific video. I'm going to be moving over to a couple of other things during this season. Dylan, obviously, I still want to try to have you on as much as I possibly can. But we're going to be phasing out of the Dynasty stuff a little bit while the 2020 season is in session. However, you all know me, and I'm going to figure out a way to tie Dynasty into almost every sentence anyway, so we'll see how it goes. But in the meantime, we will enjoy this last Dynasty show that we have coming at you guys, and let's get right to it. So I'm going to start off with the buy low quarterbacks, and my absolute favorite buy low quarterback right now is Ryan Tannehill of the Tennessee Titans. He is going nearly undrafted for 2020 only leagues right now. And then in Dynasty startup leagues, he's going in like the 15th or 16th round everywhere, especially in those one quarterback leagues, of course. But Ryan Tannehill, he had himself one hell of a year last year when he emerged in Tennessee. He meshed really well with A.J. Brown. He's got a promising future with Jonnu Smith. Obviously, they have a prolific running offense there. It seems to be the sky is the limit for Ryan Tannehill, especially since he signed a 4-year contract extension with Tennessee, and they've also already moved on from Marcus Mariota. So it leads me to believe that they're comfortable with having Ryan Tannehill as their guy for the next 3 to 4 years. What are your takes on Ryan Tannehill for the upcoming couple of seasons?
I mean, I don't disagree because I don't think he's going to cost you much of anything to acquire. So if you need a quarterback, whether it's a starter or you want to have, a good 1-2 punch or depth, definitely go out and get Ryan Tannehill. It's important to note, like you were saying, he wasn't even there the whole year. I mean, like it didn't start the whole year is my meant to say. But so the point is, like, I think a full season now of Ryan Tannehill will be even more exciting because, like you said, he's already had that rapport with A.J. Brown, and Jonnu Smith is emerging into a startable and top 10 tight end. So it should be fun to see Ryan Tannehill the next couple of years there in Tennessee.
Yeah, and it also helps that, this is just a good team in general. This is going to be a team that's going to be seeking out playoffs pretty much every year for the next few years. So that always bodes well for your fantasy quarterback. Plus, you look at a guy like, not that I'm comparing the way that they play, but you look at a guy like Matt Ryan, right? He's 35 years old. Then you look at Tom Brady, he's 42. You look at Drew Brees, he's up there as well. Quarterback is the one position where you can have an older guy and be more than fine with rolling with them for however many years until they retire. So yeah. It's like going after a guy that's 32 years old in a dynasty league, it's not exactly the most exciting thing to go after. But Ryan Tannehill, now that he's finally being used to the best of his abilities in Tennessee, it just seems silly to me that he's an afterthought, especially with, Matt Ryan, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, those kind of guys. They still offer short-term value. Matt Ryan actually offers pretty decent longevity, even at the age of 35. So a guy like Ryan Tannehill, the fact that he's slipping by the wayside, to me, it just doesn't seem right. In those one quarterback leagues, obviously it's always easier to get quarterbacks in those leagues as opposed to super flex leagues. But Ryan Tannehill is a guy that I would actively be shopping for because it's like, as you said earlier, he is practically worth pennies right now. And if there's one thing I don't want to worry about in a one quarterback league, it's who my starting quarterback's going to be. And Ryan Tannehill could easily be that weekly top 12 option for you at a fraction of the cost.
I don't disagree with anything said. And, and even if you already have a decent guy, like let's say you already have Matt Ryan, it's not going to hurt you to go out and get another older guy, like we're saying, for cheap. It's reinsurance. So definitely do it.
Yeah, and this time in a couple of years, even if Ryan Tannehill only pans out for 2 of the 4 years of his contract, in one quarterback leagues, by the time it's time for you to replace him, you could easily grab a rookie quarterback at the end of the first round or early the second round. You know what I mean? Like this is one of those things where Ryan Tannehill's a great guy to have because you don't have to worry about immediately replacing him. And in the time that it takes you to find a replacement quarterback, you will have plenty of assets accumulated by then to the point where, okay, you're not really wasting a pick on an early quarterback. So anyway, Ryan Tannehill is definitely my favorite buy low target for quarterbacks. And I actually have another one before we move on to the running backs, and that's going to be Jimmy Garoppolo of the San Francisco 49ers. So believe it or not, Jimmy G was a top 12 fantasy quarterback last year. And when I saw that stat, I was a little confused because I never really thought of him as anywhere like decent or anything, but he definitely had a handful of pretty good weeks. And plus you're giving him George Kittle for, the next 4 years or so now. You got a tremendous running back trio in San Francisco right now. They've got a ton of up-and-coming young receivers in Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Kendrick Bourne, all of those guys out there. Seems like Jimmy Garoppolo's got a lot going for him, and his career seems to just be starting. And it kind of started with a Super Bowl run last year. What are your thoughts on Garoppolo?
I mean, yeah, Jimmy just got to sit back, get a couple of rings for free behind the GOAT, and then he got to actually start recently, like you're saying. Well, not even, because he got hurt pretty much immediately after getting there, and last year was our first real year of seeing Jimmy G, and they almost made a Super Bowl. So it seems like Jimmy G and playoffs coincide. So generally when a quarterback gets to the playoffs, they're going to be decent. So what I'm trying to say is Jimmy G is definitely a serviceable starting quarterback in one quarterback leagues. And once again, same kind of thing. I don't think anyone's going to charge you the moon for Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, no, and that's the cool thing with Jimmy G too. I mean, he's going a little bit earlier in startup leagues, but he's still not being drafted as that top 12, top 15 guy. And last year, that's exactly what he was. Or no, I'm sorry, he fell 8 points short of being a quarterback one, which is the equivalent of 2 touchdowns over the entire season, or well, what's I think like 50 yards. No, not 50 yards. 200 yards. Sorry.
It's like 1 or 2 games with a little bit extra yards, or like an extra touchdown. Basically, is what you're trying to say. It's this close. It's not a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's the same situation as Ryan Tannehill, except this time you're getting a younger guy. Not quite the same rushing upside that Ryan Tannehill has, which is something that I forgot to mention when we were talking about him that I really like. But Jimmy G just has a very solid team around him, and he's another one of those guys you can go out and get for near pennies. I mean, most people probably have Jimmy G as their quarterback 2 on their dynasty rosters. They're probably not like married to him being on there. So if you're in need of a quarterback, or you just happen to be, let's say you're the guy with Tom Brady or Drew Brees, and you know you're going to need a quarterback in the next year or two, Jimmy G could be a very cheap option for you to go out and get.
I agree.
So we'll move on from the quarterbacks. Now we get to talk about something a bit more exciting, and that's going to be the running backs. So running backs, as everyone knows, they are the absolute staple of a championship team in fantasy football. And you always want to either get your guys for cheap or predict the guys before they become expensive. So I'm going to start off with a guy that you're going to want to go out and get right now. Now, he is going to cost you a pretty decent penny right now, but he's not nearly as expensive as he should be. And that's Aaron Jones of the Green Bay Packers. So Aaron Jones he just finished as the overall RB2 of 2019 in PPR leagues, like by far. Like he was so good last year, so efficient. And he is being faded to the point where he is thought of as either a low-end RB1 or even a high-end RB2 in Dynasty. Yep. People are so afraid that he's not going to get re-signed by Green Bay. I got to tell you, I think they're actually going to re-sign him. I'm not worried about A.J. Dillon replacing him. I'm worried about A.J. Dillon replacing Jamal Williams. And It's like, what are we really worried about? I mean, the main argument with A.J. Dillon is that he's going to come in and take all the goal line work from Aaron Jones. But if you look at statistics and efficiencies, Aaron Jones was the absolute number 1 most efficient goal line running back in all of 2019. I really don't think he's going to surrender many opportunities to A.J. Dillon in 2020. I mean, again, I'm going to reiterate, it's not a 2020 thing. It's a longevity thing. People are afraid that Aaron Jones isn't going to re-sign. But here's my thing. You want to win in Dynasty. even if that means you're just winning for this year. Worst case scenario, you go out, you get Aaron Jones as a quote unquote rental player, and he's going to carry you to quite a handful of wins this year. Best case scenario, you're getting a top 6, top 7 dynasty running back if he does re-sign this year. And I guarantee you're going to get him for a hell of a lot cheaper than you'd be able to get a guy like Joe Mixon, who recently just extended his contract by 4 years. Those guys are kind of in the same category for me when it comes to production. The only difference is that Joe Mixon is going to be twice the cost because he already has a contract. I would be more than willing to bet on Aaron Jones. Like I said, even if it's just for a year, and I'd be happy to pay the current price, which is not nearly as much as it could be. For example, I know some people are high on Jonathan Taylor. I, for one, am not that high on Jonathan Taylor. Somebody offered me Aaron Jones and a first-round rookie pick next year for Jonathan Taylor, straight up. I could not tell you how fast I hit the accept button. And that's the thing. Aaron Jones is being valued less than a guy who's never seen an NFL snap before, and Aaron Jones just finished as the RB overall too.
Yeah, it's nuts, man. It's kind of crazy, and it kind of shows how quickly people can have recency bias and not have recency bias. So like, here's a guy, like you just said several times, who's the number 2 running back in all of fantasy and PPR formats. And I got him the other day or the other week in a redraft league in like the end of the 2nd round. Now, that's asinine. There's no way that kind of talent should fall 20-something picks to me. Now, like you're saying, he's obviously going to be a little more expensive to buy than Mr. Tannehill and Jimmy G. But some people are severely undervaluing him, like you just pointed out and the guy pointed out. So you may be surprised what you might be able to throw at someone to get Aaron Jones back. Throw him a young player and a pick, and they might dance like how Mikey just was talking about the offer he received.
Yeah, even if you just offer a straight-up first-round pick, like I promise you, if you're trading for Aaron Jones, you're probably not in the realm of possibilities to have a top 3 pick next year if you're willing to go out on a leaf like that and try your luck with Aaron Jones. I would be more than happy with spending a pick 4 or 5 overall to get Aaron Jones on my team. That's how confident I am that he's going to get re-signed. And again, even if he doesn't, I mean, he's going to take your team to the moon this year. So Aaron Jones, definitely a prime buy low candidate. He's not getting the respect he deserves. And if you take nothing else from us this episode, take the fact that you should go out and buy Aaron Jones because he's so cheap right now.
I mean, I'm okay with him being so cheap, though. It makes him easier for me personally to get. So if people want to keep selling him for pennies or not valuing him, rather, then I'll gladly hop on over that.
And see, unluckily for you, I have Aaron Jones in our Dynasty League, so good luck getting him.
And unlucky for me, people, this man is in, I think, literally all but one of my fantasy football leagues. So I can.
Yeah, it's an obsession.
It's true.
So the next guy I have up, I actually have 2 more running backs, and they both are true buy low candidates. They're not going to cost you an arm and a leg. And the first one's going to be Duke Johnson of the Houston Texans. So I know Duke Johnson isn't the sexiest pick out there. He's not the first guy that comes to mind when you're thinking, oh man, I gotta boot up my dynasty team. I gotta get some depth here. Duke Johnson could offer a lot of potential over the next year or 2. And the reason why is because David Johnson's there. In my opinion, at this stage in David Johnson's career, him and Duke Johnson are very similar players. They've got a very similar role. Now, granted, David Johnson is a better true running back than Duke Johnson is, but everything that David Johnson can do in the air, Duke Johnson can as well. And at this point in David Johnson's career, I think Duke Johnson could kind of stay almost neck and neck with him on the ground. I know it's kind of confusing because I keep going from David Johnson to Duke Johnson.
I was just going to say, it sounds funny hearing you say Johnson.
But the fact of the matter is, I think there is a decent chance that Duke Johnson sees at least 30 to 40% of the attempts out of the backfield. And I'm mixing attempts and targets together here. But I do think Duke Johnson can find himself in pretty close to a 40% market share in this backfield, especially since David Johnson is his only competition. And, I mean, David Johnson seems to always be hurt at this stage anyway. So I like Duke Johnson as a low-end guy. I'm not saying he's going to come in and be an RB2 for your team, but you always need depth, and I feel like there is not many more players out there with the same amount of PPR upside that Duke Johnson offers.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, he's one of the best handcuffs you can afford to get because, like you just said, David Johnson is very likely to get hurt. And I wouldn't even call him a true handcuff because they very well could split the field 50-50 in hindsight if David Johnson is not what people think he is. Also, to talk about DJ, people are buying into the David Johnson hype. I am not one of them. So they're forgetting about Duke Johnson entirely. So use that to your advantage, like Mikey was just saying. Like Duke Johnson will literally cost nothing because people forget that he's even on the roster. They're only focusing on David Johnson and not Duke Johnson. Also, Duke Johnson in his career has been fantasy relevant. He has been an RB3 on a deeper roster or a flex play at times. So there's no reason to think he won't continue that trend, if not have an uptick in numbers. And once again, similar to our two quarterbacks, I don't think it's not going to cost much to get him. I can't even put in words how much it would cost because, quite frankly, if I was selling him, well, I wouldn't sell him, but I'm not sure how much I would even sell him for. So I definitely try to acquire him.
Yeah, and like I feel like Duke Johnson is the type of guy where he's not going to break the bank at all. You might even be able to get him for like a third round rookie pick or something like that. And if that's the case, I mean, if you're getting a guy who offers that weekly RB3 upside, especially in PPR leagues, I mean that seems every bit worth of a third round pick in my opinion. So moving on, we got one more running back to cover, and it is. I know I'm gonna say this quite a lot, but the reason why is because I mean Dylan and I made this list, so there's not a single player on here that I don't like as a buy low candidate. But Chase Edmonds is probably my all-time favorite buy low running back right now. I hate that we have to wait another year to see the Chase Edmonds show, but I really do think it's only going to take another year before we see the Chase Edmonds show. I've talked Chase Edmonds up in a couple of the videos, and it's not any different this time around. He is seriously, he's a really good running back. When he had his short sample size of 3 games in 2019, he absolutely tore it up. Kenyon Drake is currently 27 years old. He's on a 1-year, pretty expensive contract. I think he's getting paid like $8.5 million. Cliff Kingsbury and the team is already talking up Chase Edmonds. They think that he can be a starter or starting running back in the NFL. I don't think he offers a ton of immediate value in 2020, though I will admit I kind of like his upside similarly to the way I like Duke Johnson's upside. I think Chase Edmonds could break out and see himself in a 30 to 40% role in this backfield. But the main reason why I'm buying Chase Edmonds is because I don't think they're going to re-sign Kenyon Drake. It just doesn't make any sense to spend that amount of money on an older running back when they can have Chase Edmonds, who is like 3 years younger and will be half the cost of what Kenyon Drake would be.
I agree. It makes no sense because they can just roll with Chase Edmonds next year. They can draft a guy in the middle to late in the draft to be like, a secondary back and to take some touches away, and that's it. And then they'll have 2 running backs for a fraction of the cost. Or they can pay Kenyon Drake, and if Kenyon Drake does anything close to what he did last season, if not better, he's going to have several dollar signs in front of his name. So I think the Cardinals are going to stay clear of that. They're a rebuilding franchise. It makes no sense to pay $10 million plus to a 28-year-old running back, but it makes all the sense in the world to roll with a guy who's only 23, 24.
Yeah, absolutely. So Chase Edmonds, he's a guy. I mean, he's a little bit more expensive these days because of Cliff Kingsbury's comments and because Kenyon Drake was in the walking boot last week and all that. But I still think Edmonds is cheap enough to where you're not going to break the bank. And I personally would be more than happy to part ways with like a later second round rookie pick for Chase Edmonds, which I think is a pretty fair gauge on him. I wouldn't completely break the bank to get him, but I would be willing to buy a little bit higher than market value right now, which is still low. To get Edmonds and stash him on my team for next year.
Unfortunately, I can't do this, people, because Mikey has Jones and Edmonds on his dynasty roster. So both of these people are out of touch for me.
Well, that's the thing. It's really not. These videos aren't to help them; it's to help my own guys. But moving on to the wide receivers, and Dylan's going to make a comment about this because the first guy I'm highlighting is also on my team. But Julio Jones, fantastic buy low candidate right now. He is going in like the late second round, early third round in a lot of startups right now. People are so afraid that Julio Jones is 31 and that he's nearing the last leg of his career. But I got to tell you, it doesn't look like he's slowing down. And even if you're only getting his production for another 2 to 3 years, you're telling me you're going to pass up on like an elite top 5 receiver just because you're only going to have him for 2 or 3 years. Like that makes no sense to me. I've seen Julio Jones sold straight up for like an early first round pick. With the exception of Clyde Edwards-Helaire on a dynasty team, I would rather have Julio Jones than every single player that entered the 2020 draft this year. The fact that I've seen Julio Jones been dealt for like the 102 or the 103 or somewhere around there, that's just nuts to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think that people. I think Calvin Ridley factors in the equation. They keep thinking that he's going to take away from Julio Jones, but the only time Ridley is really shown is when Julio's had like an air quote bad game. I mean, Ridley's a great player too, but time and time again, Julio Jones has proven that he is the big dog. He is the number one receiver. He is a Hall of Fame type talent. He is one of the best receivers of all time. He hasn't slowed down at all. You're right. He's still going to get 1,000+ yards. I mean, granted, recently he doesn't want to score touchdowns, which is annoying, but he still puts up the yards and the receptions. I mean, playing, as an Eagles fan, the last game they played against him, I don't think he scored, but he still put up like 100+ yards as a 31 or a 30-year-old receiver. There's no trust me. There's no dust on the shelf. The gas is still his tank very still full. He will get you. He's a wide receiver 1 all the way. He's a top 10, top 5 wide receiver. Mikey's right. I would trade a first-round pick for him in a heartbeat 9 out of 10 times.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it just makes no sense. I mean, maybe you won't get that lucky this close to the season and get Julio Jones straight up for a first-round pick. But I mean, even if you're parting ways with a first and a second, or even potentially 2 firsts, if you think they're going to be late first-round picks, I think that's every bit worth it for Julio Jones. And you brought up Calvin Ridley. A lot of people are afraid of Julio Jones's production because of Calvin Ridley. I'm the opposite. I'm afraid of Calvin Ridley's production because of Julio Jones. I mean, if you look at Calvin Ridley and his contract and you compare it to Julio Jones and his contract, Julio Jones is going to be there for a majority of Calvin Ridley's career. I mean, if Calvin Ridley is going to break out without Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley is going to be in his 30s when it happens. So I don't understand the whole narrative that, Ridley is going to take over as the wide receiver 1 over here. It just doesn't make any sense because, again, like you were saying, Julio Jones is arguably one of the greatest receivers that's ever played in the National Football League. He's not some random guy who just stepped up and had a couple of good seasons. Like, no, he is the definition of an elite receiver. He's not going anywhere anytime soon. If you can get him low in any of your leagues, you got to pounce on that. Like today.
I agree.
Moving on, another guy who is a pretty damn good receiver. I wouldn't call him a top 5 elite receiver, but I'd still pair him into a pretty high-end wide receiver 1 at most points, and that's going to be Keenan Allen of the Los Angeles Chargers. So Keenan Allen is widely hated on right now, and I think it stems from the quarterback situation there, that it's going to be either Justin Herbert or Tyrod Taylor. I totally understand the concerns with this because on one hand, you have a rookie quarterback who's completely unproven. On the other hand, you have Tyrod Taylor, who is just less than spectacular. But people are fading Keenan Allen so much to the point where he's being rated outside of like the top 36 receivers in redrafts on some people's lists. I mean, wow. We should not be seeing Keenan Allen fall to the 6th or 7th round of redraft leagues, and that's exactly what we're seeing this year. Yeah. And then conversely, in dynasty startups, I think he's falling even more than that right now. Like Keenan Allen is like really far down there in dynasty startups, and people are just completely ignoring the fact that he's been a top 15 receiver for the last few years now. And even before that, he would have been a top 15 receiver even earlier had he not been injured. I'm pretty sure he like punctured a lung or something like that when he came down with a touchdown in like 2016 or
a little banged up earlier on in his career, but knock on wood, he's been a little more stable with health recently.
Yeah, so it just it blows my mind that Keenan Allen is being treated as like a wide receiver 3 in Dynasty and a wide receiver 3 in redraft right now because, I mean, when he's on, and he is a legitimate top 15 wide receiver. If you're worried about 2020, I really wouldn't worry that much. I mean, sure, I don't think he offers the same amount of upside this year, but what happens this time next year once the Chargers figure it out and Justin Herbert's slinging the rock like an NFL quarterback? Suddenly Keenan Allen's back into the top 15 conversation. I mean, the discount that you can get on Keenan Allen right now is just unheard of for a receiver of that caliber. So if you have the assets right now, even if you're in a rebuild, I'd go out and I'd offer something for Keenan Allen because he's a top 15 receiver and he's just widely disrespected because of a bad situation. We want to talk about bad situations. Look at A.J. Brown last year. Dylan and I brought up A.J. Brown a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, man.
And, I mean, he's just a rookie who happened to break out last year. Keenan Allen is a proven playmaker, a proven amazing receiver. Like the 1 year with a bad quarterback, it's not going to kill him. So Keenan Allen, one of my favorite buy lows right now.
But is quarterback play even that bad? There has been times in his career where Mr. Tyrod has looked decent. And what if, like you said, what if Herbert ends up being the brightest rookie out of this class year one? You don't know. There's no one saying that Burrow is going to definitively be the amazing to be all-in to be rookie, or Tua's going to win the job over Mr. Fitzpatrick, or Jordan Love's going to win the job over Aaron Rodgers, I'm just saying. So, and also, there's not much to throw in that team. I'm not knocking Hunter Henry or Mike Williams, but Mike Williams is banged up, and he has been banged up in his career quite often. So, besides Hunter Henry, who's going to take away – and Austin Eckler, who's going to take away targets from Mr. Keenan Allen?
Not many.
No one.
Exactly. So, Keenan Allen, you go out there, make a low ball offer on him. People are a lot more inclined to listen to even low ball offers on Keenan Allen than ever before. So send some feelers out there, see what the going rate is in your league. Chances are, if they are like a majority of the rest of the fantasy community, you can get Keenan Allen at a discount right now.
I would do it. I drafted him in 3 leagues this year because he fell incredibly in all 3 of them. So
yeah, it's fantastic. But moving on, I got a few more receivers on this list, so I'm going to talk about the next one, and that's going to be Michael Gallup of the Dallas Cowboys. The most disrespected Dallas Cowboy receiver, even behind CeeDee Lamb at this point. Michael Gallup is just – dude, he's so good at football. He would be a team's wide receiver number 1. If he wasn't behind Amari Cooper on this depth chart, he would be the wide receiver 1. And I am fully confident that there are at least 10 to 12 NFL teams where if he went to that team, he would be their wide receiver 1 right now. Gallup had –
I'm one of those teams.
Yeah, I'm sure the Eagles would love Gallup right now. But, yeah, I mean, Gallup, he went off for 1,100 yards last year. He was highly reliable for Dak Prescott. He's going to continue to be reliable. I know people are freaking out over the fact that CeeDee Lamb is there, but between Jason Witten and Randall Cobb not being there, there's over 160 vacated targets on that team. Even if CeeDee Lamb and Blake Jarwin, which Blake Jarwin had his share of targets last year. So I don't think there's any situation where CeeDee Lamb and Blake Jarwin split all 160 of those targets. And even if they do, signs are still pointing to Gallup seeing a similar workload as he did last year. Plus, you add in the fact that CeeDee Lamb is there. That's just more talent that's on the field. Michael Gallup is almost never going to see the number 1 corner in any matchup because they're always going to be on Amari Cooper. There's always going to be guys cheating to try to fight off Zeke and fight off CeeDee Lamb. Michael Gallup is going to be the forgotten receiver by a lot of team defenses this year. I'm not going to be the least bit surprised to see him repeat with another year of 1,100 plus yards. I think he's going to do it this year. I think he's going to do it next year. I think he's going to continue to do it because he is just that type of receiver. And he is being bought as like a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3. And even that, it's like, that's so low for a guy like Michael Gallup, who just went off for 1,100 yards last year.
And who's still super young and has a relatively young offense/quarterback combination. I guess the only scary thing about acquiring him would be whether or not Dak stays in Dallas. But this is a guy more than most people on this list. This is for now. This is for 2 years from now. This is from 5 years from now because Gallup's still so young. And also, if you're not fully sold on that, go look at Amari Cooper's contract. They can opt out, I believe, in 1 or 2 years. So if Gallup continues to produce and if Lamb's good, the Cowboys will probably say bye-bye to Mr. Amari Cooper, and you'll roll with those 2 young studs in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head with pointing out the whole Dak Prescott thing. I mean, that is the big risk that comes with buying Michael Gallup. But at the same time, it's like
It's worth it.
Yeah, it's so minimal. I don't think the Cowboys are going to let Dak walk. I mean, Dak and Jerry Jones, it's like the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. So
Yeah.
you don't really know who's going to give on the situation, but Dak's either going to settle for less or Jerry Jones is going to pay him more. And one of those two things is going to happen by next
Oh
offseason.
yeah, I agree.
I don't think we have to worry at all about Dak Prescott not being a Dallas Cowboy pretty much for the majority of his career. So with that being said, Michael Gallup is one of my favorite buy lows right now. Again, he's being drafted after both Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb on this offense. He is their third option, according to fantasy players everywhere. But he could make a case as their number one option because he's that talented.
I agree. I hope to get him in more leagues. And also about the quarterback thing, one last thing. That offense is so loaded, I don't think it matters really. As long as it's not Blake Bortles, you're fine. Like it's an average quarterback, will be okay.
Yeah, they have one of the scariest offenses in the entire league. And I mean, if Dak is there, that's just more fuel to the fire. I mean, he had 4,900 passing yards last year, and it looks like he could easily do that again this year with the weapons that they have for him. So Michael Gallup, he's a great buy low. Go out, make a low ball offer, get the conversation started, and see where you get on it. We got two more receivers. Next one up is going to be Jarvis Landry of the Cleveland Browns, another guy who is the quote-unquote wide receiver 2 on his team. Even though he was more productive and did out-target OBJ last year, Jarvis Landry is still treated as the wide receiver 2 in Cleveland. He's going super late. He is not being relied on at all in dynasty leagues. And when was the last time he wasn't a top 20 receiver in PPR? I mean, he's so consistent. You know, he's not the flashy player that OBJ is. He's never going to offer you that, top 10 receiver upside on a season. He might have a couple weeks here or there where he finishes as a top 10 receiver, but he's not a top 10 receiver by any stretch of the imagination. But he's not anything worse than a top 20 receiver at the same time, especially in those PPR leagues. I mean, he is peppered with targets. He has been his entire career, whether it's in Cleveland or whether it was in Miami. The league knows what he can do. The quarterbacks know what he can do. His coaching staff knows what he can do. He is just reliable as all hell in both real life and in fantasy, and he is being slept on way too much right now.
I completely agree, and I made a couple of noises when you were saying he's the second guy in Cleveland because that is sure as shit will not happen again. He is going to be the best player, the best receiver there again. There's not many scenarios where I see Odell finishing with more points than him. Let's put it that way. I'm that high on Jarvis. You're right. He's a very safe player. He's the guy you love to have in your wide receiver 2 or flex spot because you know he's going to get you consistently points. I think it's crazy that he's even in this conversation. He should be a player that people are drafting and paying attention to. I made the mistake. I drafted him a year ago in our Dynasty League, and I traded him way too early. And literally the game I traded him, he put 20 points, and I texted you immediately and said I hate my life.
I remember.
And he's now not on my team anymore. So it's just somebody who's speaking, who knows very well the situation. Please don't disrespect the man.
Yeah, and Jarvis Landry in my projections for 2020, I think he came out to my wide receiver 14 or wide receiver 15, which is exactly where I expect him to be, somewhere between that 14 and 20 range pretty much every year for the next few years. I mean, Jarvis Landry and OBJ are the exact same age. They're both 27 years old. Obviously, 27 is not old for a wide receiver. That is pretty much the start of the NFL prime, as recent history has showed us. The NFL prime receivers are between the ages of 27 and 30. With Julio Jones being the obvious outlier there. Jarvis Landry, I mean, he still has another three to four good, solid, consistent years left in him. And I could not think of a more consistent wide receiver 2 to have on your team. And he comes at a wide receiver at 3 best price. So Jarvis Landry, fantastic buy low candidate. And then we got one more buy low candidate for the wide receivers. And it's kind of surprising because he's so young and he was so productive last year. But Darius Slayton is just so disrespected. He is he's like the consensus wide receiver, I think 38 or 40 in dynasty startups. He's going super late. He's not even being drafted as a starting receiver for most teams in most leagues. And I mean, sure, it took him a little while to come on last year, but he has a great connection with Daniel Jones, and obviously we're all starting to believe in Daniel Jones more and more. He's top 15, top 16 for most people in Dynasty. So I don't really understand where the disconnect is, and then you factor in that Sterling Shepard is never healthy. Golden Tate is old. Evan Ingram is never healthy. Darius Slayton is going to, in my opinion, Darius Slayton could be the highest targeted player on this offense, and no one's talking about it.
It's weird, right?
What's that?
I said it's weird. Like, he has potential to be not only what you're saying, he has potential to be one of the biggest steals of any redraft or dynasty draft, given what you just laid out. Like, the whole, besides Barkley and then the quarterback, which he can't catch and throw, he can only throw the balls. The other options there are either old or injury prone, whereas Darius is young and has proven so far to be very consistent when he gets the ball. I mean, I personally had to watch him several times as an Eagles fan. In both games, he put up a lot of touchdowns. So the guy has got it. And Mikey hasn't really talked about it, but another guy who probably won't cost that much because of how low he's viewed on the totem pole or the crop of receivers. Also, he didn't mention it. Another guy he has on his dynasty team. So this is another list for you.
Oh yes, but yeah, Darius Slayton. I mean, I kind of started figuring out who Darius Slayton was this time last year, and I actually traded for him in our league before the 2019 season had started. And I believe I traded away N'Keal Harry for a first-round pick in 2020, which I think I turned into DeAndre Swift this year. And I got that, and I got Darius Slayton for N'Keal Harry after I took N'Keal Harry at 102 overall last year. So I couldn't be more stoked with that trade. You're definitely not getting N'Keal Harry and a first-round pick for Darius Slayton, or you're not getting Darius Slayton and a first-round pick for N'Keal Harry these days, I should say.
No.
He's definitely going to cost a little bit more than N'Keal Harry, but he's not he's not going to cost you a first-round pick. Hell, he might even cost you like a low-end second-round pick. Most people who have Darius Slayton on their team, they either took them in the 5th round of their rookie drafts, or he went undrafted and someone picked him up off of waivers a couple weeks later. So he's still raw in terms of being in the NFL and in terms of being in the eyes of fantasy football. But there's no reason to believe why he can't continue to be at least like a high-end wide receiver 3 with week-winning upside. I mean, he had multiple touchdowns multiple weeks last year. So Darius Slayton's a really fun guy to have on your fantasy football team. He's young as all hell because he just got drafted last year. And right now he's much cheaper than you'd expect him to be. So Darius Slayton, great guy to go out and get. And that'll wrap up the receivers. I got 3 more guys for you on the list today. All 3 of them are tight ends. And the first one I'm going to talk about, since we've started kind of at a contender level and worked our way down to the true buy lows, I'll start with the tight end that you want to buy low if you're a contender, and that's Darren Waller. Darren Waller is going after guys like Hunter Henry, TJ Hawkinson, Evan Ingram, Hayden Hurst. Even in redraft leagues, Darren Waller is going after these guys. Tyler Higbee's another one.
Yep.
Darren Waller was just like a top 3, top 4 tight end last year. He is still going to be the highest targeted player on this Raiders offense. He's only 27 years old. Like, I don't really understand what the whole disconnect is here. It's not like he broke out at the age of 32 or something like that. Like,
yeah,
I don't understand where the Darren Waller hate comes from, especially because they extended him as well. So he's cemented in with the team. I get it that Derek Carr is less than exciting, but I mean, seriously, what the hell is going on here? Why is Darren Waller falling so hard?
I don't know. He's even, like you said, I've done a couple redrafts lately, obviously, because dynasty drafts are done. And even in those redrafts, he's falling to an uncomfortable level where you scooped him up like in the 4th round in one of the redrafts we're in. And I was like, how did this guy, the top 5 of his position, fall this late? And in dynasty drafts, he's falling way later than you'd want to. So I don't get it. Derek Carr's locked into a contract. Waller's locked in. Most of their receivers are young. They're not proven. Waller's proven. He has experience. I don't get why people are so afraid of him. Mikey said he's 27. Tight ends can stay relevant until 31, maybe 32. He's going to be at least elite or top 5, probably until he's 30. So you get 3 seasons out of him. He might digress a little bit, well, but still, either way, you're trading for a guy who's going to be good again this year and at least next year as well.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the Fantasy Pros consensus rankings right now. So he is going after Evan Ingram. He's technically ranked higher than Hunter Henry, T.J. Hawkinson, and Noah Fant. But in a recent Dynasty startup that I was in, he went after all 3 of those guys. Darren Waller was like the 8th or 9th tight end that came off the board. And again, he just finished as an elite option in 2019. And I'm not going to say I expect him to be a top 3 option again this year, but I'd be very surprised to see him finish outside of the top 5. So a guy like Darren Waller and the current price that he's at, and his value shows in the Dynasty startups where he's going after some of those younger guys who are still unproven. Darren Waller's an awesome buy low candidate right now. He offers tremendous short-term upside, and there's still even a pretty decent amount of long-term upside too. Because again, he's 27. That's perfectly fine for a tight end, especially for a tight end who didn't break out until they were 26 or 27. He's still got some gas left in the tank for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no one on the roster behind him that's threatening to take his job. It's not like they went out and drafted a tight end in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th round or something.
Well, yeah, Jason Witten's so terrifying, isn't he?
Yeah, age ancient. He's so terrifying.
Yeah, Jason Witten's not gonna do much to Darren Waller. And then you have the argument, sure, they just drafted Henry Ruggs, Brian Edwards. They have Hunter Renfrow. Ty Williams is still there. Josh Jacobs wants to see his 60 receptions this year.
Hey, I hope that happens, all right?
Yeah.
My guy.
Yeah. Don't hold your breath on that one. But yeah, Darren Waller, he's not even contending against any of these guys, at least for the 2020 season for targets. I mean, Darren Waller is the clear-cut guy. He'll be the highest targeted member on this team. And Derek Carr loves himself some Darren Waller. We saw that last year. We're going to see it again this year. And people who have been fading Darren Waller this offseason are going to regret it. Moving on, we got Jonnu Smith, who has been one of my favorite targets to hype up this offseason at the tight end position. A few years ago, everyone thought Jonnu Smith was going to come in and be this awesome tight end, and then people were disappointed when he sat behind Delanie Walker on the depth chart. The issue is that, 1, Delanie Walker was a good tight end.
Yes.
2, tight ends take a few years to develop. Well, here we are a few years later. Jonnu Smith is finally where we wanted him to be. He's on a completely revamped offense with Ryan Tannehill, a completely revamped team in general, being in Tennessee. They've already said how much they like him this offseason and how much they want to try to get him the ball this year. I feel like a Jonnu Smith breakout is coming, and his price has been rising over the last few weeks now because more people are starting to get exposed to Jonnu Smith. But I still feel like he's a buy low, especially with where he is.
I definitely agree with that. It's crazy to think that if you look at the offense, so now he finally has a better quarterback. There's no Delanie Walker there finally, which it feels like Delanie Walker was on there forever. But yeah, he's a great tight end, obviously. But so he's by himself essentially. He's running away with the starting role. You look at their receivers. Besides Brown, Corey Davis and Tajay Sharp, I think, is their third guy, right?
No, Tajay Sharp's in Minnesota now.
Okay,
but that's the
my
thing.
point.
You
I don't
can't
know
tell
who
me
the
he's
third guy
the third
is.
guy in Tennessee. Exactly.
So there's no argument that he's going to get targets away from him. I can't even name the third receiver. And Corey Davis, we've all fell into that trap once or twice before and hasn't panned out for us. So Jonnu Smith.
Yeah, Jonnu Smith should be the second highest targeted player on this offense this year. And I mean, if you think I'm incorrect saying that, whoever's watching this, tell me who's going to out-target him besides A.J. Brown on that team, because I would love to know.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, seriously. But anyway, we got one more on the list today for our buy lows. It's another tight end, and we brought up Michael Gallup last round. I'm going to bring up Blake Jarwin this time around. Blake Jarwin, he's having himself one hell of a camp. He hasn't been able to break out, ironically enough, because Jason Witten was on the team, who is now apparently stealing targets from Darren Waller. But Blake Jarwin finally has a chance to break out. You know, he was decently targeted last year, but as I was saying earlier, Cobb and Jason Witten, both of the guys that played in the middle of the field, they vacated over 160 targets. You know, you have to think that even if CeeDee Lamb somehow absorbs 100 targets of that his rookie year, you still got to believe that Blake Jarwin is seeing at least 40 of those vacated targets. You know, if he's seeing an additional 40 targets on the year, maybe an additional 30 catches from where he is, suddenly he is firmly into the tight end one conversation. He is being majorly slept on. He is going so late in drafts. Right here on the consensus rankings, Blake Jarwin is the tight end 20, according to all of the Fantasy Pros experts.
20?
Yeah, I don't know how he is so far down. I wouldn't even say he's tight end 20 in redrafts this year, let alone in Dynasty. And
that's crazy. I can't even name 20 tight ends off the top of my head. I got to really think about that.
But that's the thing. It makes no sense that Blake Jarwin is that heavily faded in leagues this year. I don't understand why he's going so late in Dynasty startups. I don't understand why you can get him for so cheap right now. But if you need a tight end, you got an extra second-round pick, or even I would lead with a third-round pick. If you're trying to get Blake Jarwin right now, I would lead with a rookie third-round pick and start talks from there, because I genuinely think you might be able to get Blake Jarwin for a third-round rookie pick right now.
I completely agree. It's pretty crazy to think that he's getting faded there too, because the guys left who are taking shares away from him. If you look at Dallas's receivers, they're obviously incredibly talented. But Jarwin could emerge as the actual, like, legit red zone threat out of the receiving options there, in my personal opinion.
I hate to change the subject here. By the time whoever sees this, that you'll probably already know this information, but breaking news just now, Alvin Kamara is being shopped by the Saints. They might trade Alvin Kamara. What the hell is going on here?
Yikes, I have him in a league.
Yeah, I have him in a couple of my leagues too. None of my main leagues, at least, but holy shit. Okay,
Did not learn from the Jaguars that there wasn't much of a running back market? Obviously, Alvin Kamara is leaps and bounds better than Fournette, but no one bit on Fournette, so I don't know if anyone's going to bite on AK.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this is just – maybe they're just disrespecting Alvin Kamara and they're trying to scare him into signing a contract or something. But either way, I cannot see this ending well. So you know what? While I have you guys here, buy low, Alvin Kamara. People are going to be so afraid of where he's going. Not even kidding, though. Buy low on Alvin Kamara after this news. Send out a feeler. 1 first-round pick. See if you can do it. Pull off the impossible.
I mean, you might be able to do it, because even if he doesn't play this year, he'll be back. Which I don't think will happen. I think he'll play. But you're right, because if you get him next year, he's still young enough where you got an elite running back. So try buy Kamara. Go for it.
Oh my gosh, that's too wild. And on the buy lows episode, nonetheless, this is our fault.
But Jarwin, back to Jarwin. He's going to be. I think he's going to emerge as the number 1 red zone threat for the or end zone, I guess you would say. Well, it's the same thing for the Dallas Cowboys.
I would love that. I mean, well, you know me, I'd like to see it be CeeDee Lamb, but I can definitely see it being Blake Jarwin. He's very effective. He's a big dude.
I think it can happen because, well, Lamb would be cool too, but just because Witten really kind of was that, or they tried to do that, but Witten was, old as dirt, so there's only so much he could do at this point. So I think Jarwin can emerge as a true weapon on that offense.
Yeah, but so there you have it. Those are our buy low targets, our 2 quarterbacks, our 3 running backs, our 5 receivers, 3 tight ends, and, of course, the random addition of Alvin Kamara just there. But, yes, as I was saying at the beginning of this video, this is going to be the last time we have a Dynasty-specific video for a little while now. We're going to be opening up a new schedule for the 2020 season, really focusing on redraft to try to get everyone prepared for their upcoming matchups. But I would be lying if I said that I wasn't going to try to tie some Dynasty into some of the episodes. So stay tuned for those, specifically on the episodes that I will be featured on Thursdays. But Dylan, thanks for hopping on here again with me, man. I really appreciate it. It's always so much fun talking football with you. And I guess the next time we actually get to do this, it will be week 1, because I'm not going to be having any videos next week. Unfortunately, I'm going to be enjoying vacation. But the next time I see you on one of these videos, we will be in the middle of actual football season.
Actual football, and Alvin Kamara might be on another team.
That'll be wild. But yeah, so guys, thanks for tuning in to the Dynasty Stock Market here on the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Catch you guys later.